Hello, everyone, and welcome to Will ND. I'm here with the world famous Jeffrey from Only Talk Sports. Jeffrey, how excited are you for this week of college football? It's
I
more
think it's
excited
gonna be.
than before, or
I think it's gonna be a fantastic week. I
Mhm.
mean, there's a lot of great games that, like I always say about games, people only look at the big games, but there's a lot of sneaky good games. There's a lot of games that people should check out, and it's gonna be a fantastic week.
Well, we're starting off with one that might not be the best game, but I am kind of curious about it because it's against a stone wall in a very fast moving object. We have Iowa going to Columbus to take on Ohio State. Do you feel like the Iowa can get those turnovers from last year going on? And do you think they have any chance to beat the Buckeyes, or is it just going to be a whole domination by Ohio State and Columbus?
Yeah, this game right here is one of those things where it's like it's on Fox only because Ohio State is the team that I was playing. Because otherwise, I mean, I want the game to be close. I really do. And I think that, like you just said, if Iowa does somehow can create turnovers, they can maybe keep it close. But then at the end of the game, eventually Ohio State's going to score points. And Iowa's just not, they have not shown that they can score points against anybody except Rutgers or anybody worse than that. So I don't think Iowa's going to be able to hang in this game. Anything's possible, but more likely not.
So the line is spread at Ohio State minus 30. Do you think that they'll cover that huge spread?
Ugh. I wouldn't even touch it. I don't bet anyway, but I
Mm.
wouldn't even touch that. That's way too steep. Because I mean, it could be like Ohio State's up 35, and then Iowa gets a pick six at the end and makes it 28 points. Like you just never know. So I probably wouldn't touch that. But it could go either way because Ohio State could beat it 49-7, or it could be 35 or 42 like 20. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if Spencer Petras can pull a hat out of his, like a rabbit out of his hat, and kind of keep them in the game. But I don't know. Like I just think that Iowa offense won't. I don't know. I feel like their best offense will be that their defense getting pick sixes.
Mhm.
Honestly, I think that's their only chance. So the next game that we got is an underdog going to one of the Blue Bloods, and I think this one's going to be a little closer. We got Syracuse taking on Clemson, with Clemson favored by 13 and a half points. Do you feel like the Cinderella run can keep going for Syracuse? Do you think that they can at least get a New Year's Six bowl this season with Dino Babers?
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about this game to me is because it kind of reminds me of Indiana 2 years ago. And I know that was during the virus year, so it was kind of different where a lot of teams weren't 100%. But it's like Indiana, they won their first game against Penn State, and then they went further along throughout the season and they were building confidence, and then they were able to keep it close against Ohio State. Syracuse is building confidence by being 6-0. They're undefeated and their confidence is at an all-time high. And I think that they believe they can beat Clemson. That doesn't mean they're going to beat Clemson, but I think that they believe, and belief is all that matters. You have to believe you can win, and if you have that belief, then there's a chance. If this game was at Syracuse, then I would almost be inclined to say that they could win, but since it's in Death Valley, they're probably not going to win, but it is possible.
I really like the quarterback play of Garrett Schrader. It's a good story because the guy was left for dead after with Baylor, and then he came into upstate New York and is throwing 12 touchdowns and 3 interceptions with 1,434 passing yards. Like, I did not think that he was going to be doing this well. I mean, it's still not as impressive as DJ is, but with 137 out of 213 with 1,665 passing yards. But I did not think it would be that close between the two guys coming into the season. And another really fun part of this game is that both running backs are just having fantastic seasons, with Sean Tucker from Syracuse with 644 yards and 6 touchdowns with 124 carries, and Will Shipley with 96 carries and 567 yards and 8 touchdowns. This game could be for the Belindikoff Award, man. I really love watching these running backs.
Yeah, I like Syracuse's team a lot. I think Garrett Schrader, has been a big surprise. I mean, it's kind of interesting because Tommy DeVito, who's now at Illinois, was at Syracuse, and they are kind of similar quarterbacks in that they can run and throw. Obviously, I think Garrett Schrader is a better runner than Tommy DeVito, but still, it's just interesting that it didn't work out with Tommy DeVito, but now it is working out with Garrett Schrader. And I agree that Sean Tucker is a fantastic running back. But the difference in this game is can Syracuse be able to protect Garrett Schrader all game, give him enough time to throw with Clemson's defensive line? They've got an elite defensive line. That's the problem with these games like this, because Clemson has elite position groups. Syracuse doesn't have any elite position groups outside of a few great players. They do have great players, but they don't have an elite position group like Clemson does. If they can stop Clemson's defensive line from getting in the backfield, then I think Syracuse does have a chance.
I feel like this is like with the old way back in the day with Charlie Weiss's Notre Dame team. Like I felt like we had a few great players. Like we had that Jimmy Clausen to Golden Tate connection. But besides that, like we just didn't have much. And like Brian Kelly, like coming in, he shored up the defense, and then Harry Houston shored up the offensive line. So we were great at both lines of scrimmage and had some good guys on the secondary. But I mean, we didn't have that skill talent on offense. But yeah, it's kind of funny seeing Syracuse being like that now. But I don't know. Like the one thing is, I'm concerned about Clemson's. I don't know. I feel like their receivers aren't that good. Maybe Syracuse can exploit that on their defense, but I don't know. I'm still leaning Clemson. I don't know if they'll cover the 13.5. Do you think that they'll cover the 13.5, or do you think it'll be a pretty close game?
That's a really good question. Again, it's kind of tough to tell because, I mean, if Clemson plays like Clemson can play, then I think Clemson's going to easily win this game. But Syracuse, as Daniel Henry says in the chat, Syracuse always plays Clemson tough, and they do. So, I mean, if Syracuse, again, with the belief that they can beat Clemson, this definitely could be a one-possession game. So I would probably say I think it could be more likely to be a under the 13 than over the 13.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know not everyone cares about the group of five, but we'll only touch on this game quickly because we haven't done that much research into these teams. But this is a huge game for who's going to get into that one New Year's Six bowl. We have Cincinnati traveling to Southern Methodist. And the thing that really got me into this game was only a 3.5 point spread for Cincinnati. So they don't think that they're even like a touchdown favorite, because usually they add 3 to whoever the underdog is. But do you think that have you seen much Cincinnati? Do you think that they're even comparable to the team from last year?
Well, the only game I got to see of Cincinnati is the Indiana game. I did watch that game. Indiana played Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is still a good team, but they are nowhere near as good as last year. And when people are like, well, "What do you mean? They're still like 5-1." They were the best group of 5 team last year that I've ever seen, because group of 5 teams never do that. Even UCF, I know that they beat Auburn that year with Mackenzie Milton, but the Cincinnati team was better than that UCF team. And they are nowhere near as good this year because, unlike Alabama and Georgia, they just cannot replace talent like that. They have decent recruits coming in. They've done a really good job under Luke Fickell to make them a really good program. They just do not replace talent as much as the Power 5 teams. They're not as good. SMU's been very fishy this year because they've struggled. That UCF game, they got destroyed, and they look terrible, but then they've bounced back and won a couple games. So I probably would say Cincinnati would probably beat them by at least a touchdown, but SMU could win because it's at SMU, but I think Cincinnati is definitely still a better football team.
Do you think that they'll have a shot to maybe be a Power 5 team like UCF did, or do you think they're definitely not as good as that UCF team? Because obviously they aren't as good as the team last year that they had, but do you think that they're at least close enough to UCF?
Well, I think, like I said, I think Cincinnati's team last year was a little bit better than the UCF team of 2017. But obviously, Cincinnati and UCF are going to the Big 12. So they're both going to technically be Power 5s in a couple of years, even though I made a video on my channel a long time ago. I basically was like, the Power 5 is dead. Is the Power 5 still going to exist? And I basically said the Power 5 is dead because it's going to be the Power 2, whether people like it or not. Because, I mean, even now, the Power 5, doesn't really exist. You see that the Big Ten at the top and the SEC at the top, unfortunately, is way better than the other leagues at the top. And even though UCF and Cincinnati and BYU and Houston are going to be joining the Big 12, calling it the Power Five is probably a little bit, it's not legit, but still it's going to be the Power Five. And I think that Cincinnati and UCF are going to be pretty good in the Big 12 playing those other teams, but they're probably not on the level of TCU, Oklahoma State, and, those other teams in that conference. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do when they get there.
Now, a game that means a lot to me and a game that I really want to win is University of Nevada, Las Vegas, heading to South Bend. I cannot, Jeffrey, please tell me that we'll win this game. I can't take another loss after that devastating loss at the hands of the Cardinal of Stanford. The tree, we couldn't chop down the tree. Can we stop the rebels from invading North and South Bend?
I think you're completely good. That's why I usually do a Notre Dame preview for it, but I was like, I'm not doing. They're not gonna lose. If Notre Dame loses, then something's wrong with football. It's UNLV. They're horrible. I mean, they're like really bad. And Notre Dame, people are like, why is Notre Dame favored as much? Because UNLV is that bad. If Notre Dame struggles against UNLV, then Notre Dame is definitely not good at all. I think Notre Dame is still a good team. The Stanford loss wasn't good, but Notre Dame still won at North Carolina. I still think Notre Dame is a good team. They've just had some struggles under a first-year head coach. Look at Miami. They're struggling with a first-year head coach. It does happen. So I think Notre Dame's going to be fine, and I think they're going to easily beat UNLV.
Mm-hmm. I know, I haven't had any time this week because of midterms, but I know they did say UNLV is improved, but I don't know. I really hope that they aren't improved enough to beat my Fighting Irish. Now, another game, we have I know we lost to Marshall, but I do think that Marshall is in a better conference than UNLV. But I don't know. I'm feeling better about this game now that Jeffrey gave me that information. Now, this is the CBS game of the week. We got Ole Miss heading into Baton Rouge to take on Brian Kelly and his family, LSU Tigers. Now, what surprised a lot of people is that LSU is actually a 2.5-point favorite in this game. Now, obviously I am biased and I want Ole Miss to win, and I believe that Ole Miss will win. But what do you think, Jeffrey, as an unbiased take on this game?
I don't know. This is a very interesting game here because, I would say LSU is a tough place to play. And it's Death Valley. It's like Clemson, they call it the same thing. And it's like LSU is a good football team, and they just went on the road at Florida. So I think LSU is getting better. But Tennessee, and obviously Tennessee is really, really good this year. But Tennessee blew the doors off of them. And that still can't get out of my mind of the LSU fans leaving the stadium in the third quarter. Ole Miss, I know the thing about Ole Miss that's really interesting is that they haven't played anybody. That's the argument everybody's saying. And they beat Kentucky, and I know that Kentucky probably should have beaten them, but it is what it is at the end of the game. But this is a true definition of a toss-up game. That's why the spread is indicative of, you said LSU's favored by 2.5. It's essentially an even game because of the fact that usually 3 points of the home field, and that's even. So, again, I actually really don't have a great read on this game. I think Ole Miss obviously has a lot more to play for, obviously, because they're undefeated and they can still make the playoff even if they lose to Alabama later in the year, possibly if everything shook out right, possibly. LSU's already done. Do they care enough about this game? I think they do, obviously, because Brian Kelly's probably going to make sure that they do play hard, obviously. But if I had to pick, I probably would lean Ole Miss barely by 3. But I'm not super confident in it because, again, anything can happen at LSU, but I would barely pick Ole Miss probably.
What fascinates me about this Ole Miss team is that they're coached by Lane Kiffin, but they're not Lane Kiffin-like. This team runs the ball and has good defense, which is never what a Lane Kiffin team at USC had. So it's really interesting to see what's going on at in Oxford. Now, one thing that a lot of SEC there's a reason a lot of SEC fans are rooting for Ole Miss in this game. They want to have a 4-team all SEC playoff with Ole Miss, Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee. Do you think we should cancel college football if this happens, Jeffrey?
If this happened, my dad would be in heaven because, again, my dad loves Alabama. He would be like, great, bring it on. The SEC. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I would want to burn college football down and say we need to fix this. I agree. I mean, that would be horrible in my eyes because I'm more of a person that I like to see different teams get in. Obviously, it never occurs, even though Cincinnati and Michigan made it last year, but then the results were ugly when they did. But, I mean, I don't think a 4-team playoff is obviously going to happen. I don't even think at this point until further notice, I don't think a 3-team playoff is going to happen. It definitely could, but I hope it don't because I'd like to see other teams get in, but it's going to be very interesting to see. But you are right. The SEC people do want Ole Miss in there to get a 4-team playoff, but it's going to be very interesting. But I don't think Ole Miss is going to be able to make it all the way. I don't think they're good enough to make it all the way with one loss. I think they will lose twice, but it is possible it could happen.
Now we have Mark here. Mark came here, and he says it's LSU done. They've lost one SEC game. If they run the tables, they go to the SEC title game. This is a very great point by Mark. Now the one reason why, I kind of thought, I mean, I don't think LSU's done is because of how bad they looked against Tennessee. And this is a big test for LSU because they're facing a completely different offenses in the way that their strengths are because Ole Miss can run the ball down your throat and they can throw. They aren't terrible at the quarterback position with Jackson Dart, but it's just much different. So, do you think that LSU's defense will be able to handle them better? I mean, I think they'll be able to handle them better. It's just how much better do you think that they'll do?
Yeah, I just think it's very interesting with LSU in general because I don't know. I mean, Tennessee is a lot better than people thought. And it's Tennessee beating LSU the way they did. LSU probably didn't even think Tennessee was that good. And I mean, they just got smacked in the mouth and then that game was over. And it's possible that they could handle Ole Miss a bit better because Ole Miss is running the football a lot more. And I think SEC defenses in general are a bit better at stopping the run than the pass. Tennessee is an elite passing team. So I do think LSU is going to be able to stop Ole Miss a bit more, but it's going to be very interesting to see what LSU does in this game. And I agree with Mark that LSU is not done in per se, but they're not going to probably win out, man. I mean, you still got Alabama. You still got this game here. LSU's not going to win out. More than likely.
The last two Ole Miss teams led the team in rushing. Now, I haven't followed the SEC as closely last year than I did this year because I kind of got more engrossed into the Voice of College Football community. But that is very interesting, and we really appreciate you being here, Mark. We made it. We already made it. This is our first episode, and we already made it. As Mark Rogers is now on the Will and Jeffrey show. Now, this is the game that College Game Day is going to be at. This is the game that Eric, our buddy Eric, will be at, and we're really excited, and we really hope that we can get Eric on TV holding up a subscribe to Mark Rogers Voice of College Football sign. I really want to see that, so hopefully that can happen. But what do you think about this huge game in Autzen Stadium?
I think this game is very interesting because it reminds me of the USC-Utah game and the fact that I thought USC would beat Utah because I thought USC was playing a lot better and they were playing really well. But then Rice-Eccles is one of the toughest environments, and Tim is right. Tim was exactly right. I said that USC was going to win, but USC went on the road at Utah, and they didn't win. And obviously there were a couple questionable calls in the game, but that's going to happen when you're the road team 99% of the time. But this is the same game here where everybody's on the UCLA train because they're undefeated, but they're going to have to go to Autzen Stadium, and it's going to be very tough to win there. And UCLA is playing really good football, but they beat Utah at home, and they beat Washington at home. It's a whole different animal to beat a really good team on the road. I'm rooting like heck for UCLA again because I want a Pac-12 team in the playoff. I really do. But to me, I don't know. I mean, I want to pick UCLA. I kind of keep flip flopping here, so I really don't really have a pick in this game because I keep flip flopping. I want UCLA to win. I think they can win, but that home environment in Oregon is, since the Georgia game has been rolling, Oregon probably would win by 3-7, but UCLA could easily win by 3-7. It's very interesting. Tony said it right there. It'll be interesting.
Mm-hmm. It will. And I think the reason that we think this is because of the two quarterbacks, DTR and Bo Nix. Now, DTR, we've only seen good DTR this year. And after the first game, we've only seen good Bo Nix. And that's what makes the game so interesting. It's like one of these guys is going to have to outshine the other to win. And the two numbers are very similar, as DTR is 122 for 163 with 1,510 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And Bo is 131 out of 186 with 1,526 yards and 12 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. So it's just crazy how even these guys are. And and also their running games. Oregon has a 3-man running group, and UCLA only has one in Zach Charbonnet. But they're both pretty equal if you look at the stats. I don't know. These teams are just so evenly matched. Yeah, that Tim. I even use your info here, Tim. So I appreciate you for the info. I don't know. It's so crazy how even these teams are, and this is just what makes this game so exciting. And I do love it. One thing is, I really do love that this game isn't in the Rose Bowl and that we'll have an atmosphere. I know, like UCLA in the past has had an atmosphere. In 2014, they had the most fans. But I don't know if something happened. I don't know if it's COVID, but their fans just haven't been showing up, and it's sad. It's sad to see a top 10 team just not have good fan support. So definitely happy that this game is in Austin and not the Rose Bowl.
And what you just said about these teams are very similar. That's the way I feel about, like, when I say on most of my videos and on my channel, I always say when I can't decide between two teams, it's usually a safe bet to pick the home team because there's nothing separating them, and the only thing that separates them is where it's being played. Literally, you look at UCLA and Oregon, there's just not much difference. So, again, I want UCLA to win, but I probably would have to lean Oregon barely, but I think UCLA definitely can win. But as Tony and Tim have pointed out, UCLA has choked a lot in big games. So it's going to be very interesting.
Of course, we know that USC will be filling up the Rose Bowl, but it's just sad that we're going to have to wait until then to see UCLA get good fan support. So the next game that we're going to be talking about, and this game, I'm definitely leaning towards one team, but they are playing on the road, and it's Texas and Oklahoma State. Now, Oklahoma State, there's a play calling at the end for Oklahoma State. I felt like they had that game against TCU, but the play calling at the end just really let them down, playing not to lose. And taking on a resurgent Texas team. And I'm still not ready to say that Texas is back because I'm going to have to, like, if they win the Big 12, they will be back. But they definitely are looking better. And it's because of Quinn Ewers. What do you think of this game going on in Boone Pickens and Stillwater? Texas is a 6-point favorite.
I think it's really interesting what you just said about Texas not being back, because I wrote in one of the chat rooms a while back, probably on one of Mark's shows about I think it was the Sunday show actually, and I said that TCU is back, not Texas. And the one guy that's a Texas fan, I can't remember which one. He was the guy on the bottom left of the screen, but he was like upset. And it's like, when I mean by Texas is not back, you're absolutely right. Texas has to win the Big 12 to be back. TCU's back because TCU has never been at Texas's level, and for TCU being back is just being relevant, and they are relevant again, and they're really good. But Texas is not back there yet. If they had to beat Alabama and Quinn Ewers hadn't gone down, then they would be more back in people's eyes. But like you just said, Texas is favored, and Texas has that national aura still. I think Oklahoma State, like you talking about, saying that they played to not lose the game against TCU, I agree with that 100% because it's kind of like Indiana in the bowl game against Tennessee. They were winning that game. 2 touchdowns with 5 to go, and then they play not to lose. And when you play not to lose, you lose. It happens every single time. So if Oklahoma State plays to win, I think they can beat Texas. But if Quinn Ewers plays at his highest level, then Texas can win.
Yeah. It'll be interesting because I actually really like with Spencer Sanders' game. So I think this might be this. I mean, this is probably going to be the second best quarterback that Quinn Ewers will play against. So it'll be interesting to see how well he plays on the road because this is Quinn Ewers' really first true road game. As the Texas Tech game was a big road game, but he was hurt for that. So this is really his first time in a hostile environment, and it'll be interesting to see how he plays.
I agree.
And this is a fun game to look at. It's not going to be the best football, but it will be for who's the 13th best team in the SEC. And it's Vandy heading to Missouri. Now, the one reason I think that Vandy has a chance is they kind of have an offense this year. Like, if you look at AJ Swan, like he's putting up good numbers. Like he's thrown for 953 yards, 8 touchdowns, and a really important thing about him, no interceptions. And when you look at Brady Cook from Missouri, he has 111 yards on 171 carries, 1,217 yards. So he's thrown for a lot, but he's thrown 5 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, which is not good. So do you think that there's any chance that Vandy has a miracle win in Missouri?
Again, it's kind of like with UCLA and Oregon, not exactly the same. I want Vanderbilt to win just to get the mark off their bat. They've lost all these games in a row. Kind of like I was really happy when Arizona finally won, a Pac-12 game. It's like they hadn't won in so long. I think Vanderbilt is a much better team because I had a video when they blew out Hawaii. I had a video on my channel. I was like, "Is Vanderbilt improved?" And then go to find out that Hawaii's just that bad, and Vanderbilt blew them out. So, I mean, Vanderbilt is a better team, but Missouri has better players on the whole team overall. Vanderbilt is still – they have a long way to go. The problem with Vanderbilt is obviously they don't invest in football. Their football stadium is one of the worst in the country. If they invested in football, they'd be good. I mean, there's no reason any program could not be good. That's why Indiana's not that great at football because they don't invest money in it. But Vanderbilt, I mean, they can beat Missouri because Missouri is one of the worst teams in the SEC. But I think the reason why you said the Vanderbilt quarterback doesn't have any interceptions is probably because, and to be honest, I haven't really watched Vanderbilt at all, so I'm not probably the best guy here to talk about Vanderbilt. But they're probably playing conservative. They're playing safe, whereas Missouri's probably taking more shots. It's probably why he has more interceptions. As Manimal Matt points out, Vanderbilt does have beautiful campus, but it's for academics. Academics is king at Vanderbilt. That's why it's beautiful, but their athletics are ugly. Alabama's stadium blows out Vandy's. That's what I mean by that. Vanderbilt's got a beautiful campus, though. But I think Missouri's going to win this game by 7-10, but at least by 7-10. But I think Vanderbilt can hang around, and I would like to see them win for sure.
Yeah, I would like to see Clark Lee get the monkey off of his back. And we really do appreciate Mark for subscribing to Will MD. I really appreciate that, Mark. And it means a lot coming from a legendary man such as yourself. So this is a game that your dad will definitely be glued on. It's Mississippi State and their cowbells. Maybe some cowbells will make their way into Tuscaloosa. I'm not sure. Taking on the reeling Alabama Crimson Tide. Let's see, as this is a big week for them to bounce back. Now, the one reason I'll say that Mississippi State has a chance, and it's not just because of their passing attack. The reason that they have a chance is because, like, usually Alabama, they look a lot better after a loss than most teams do. They look just so good after a loss. But, like, they looked bad after Texas and didn't play that well against Texas A&M. And then they looked bad against Texas A&M. And then they looked good against Tennessee. So, like, I feel like Nick Saban, like, he usually disciplines his players a lot after a bad performance. He hasn't really done that yet. So this is the one reason I feel like Mississippi State has hope. But Alabama, their talent is so much better than Mississippi State's. And they're Their defense also was much better because Mike Leach, like, since he has the air raid, most air raid teams don't have a great defense, and Mississippi State's, although they looked good against Texas A&M's offense, it just like their defenses just don't really compare. What do you think about this game, and do you think Mississippi State has a chance to walk into Tuscaloosa with a win?
Well, I think that with Mississippi State, you didn't last year. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that when Alabama lost to Texas A&M, the next game they played was Mississippi State last year as well, and they just blew the doors off Mississippi State. And I do think Alabama's got some problems, and when I mean some problems, it's not many, but they do have some problems this year that they didn't have last year. I think that Alabama's defense, for some reason, even though they have elite talent at all positions, Will Anderson's not playing as well as he did last year. And I mean, because he was getting like Heisman hope last year for a defensive player. Aiden Hutchinson obviously got in there, and Will Anderson was on the fringe and all that. But he's nowhere near that level this year. I don't know why, but and I'm not saying one player makes a difference, but he's not as good. The whole defense isn't playing as well. The offense, everybody's trashing Bill O'Brien. I think Alabama's offense is fine because you've got the Houdini as the CBS commentator, Brad Nesler and Gary Danielson were pointing out the Houdini. They got the Houdini back there with Bryce Young. Anything's possible. As long as he doesn't get hurt, I think Alabama's going to win this game. If somehow he got hurt, then maybe Mississippi State would have a chance. But as long as he's healthy, I think that Alabama is going to win this game. They're going to bounce back. It's at Alabama as well. It's going to be very difficult for Mississippi State to go in there. I know Texas A&M almost did, but as you said, Alabama plays better after a loss. And I do agree with Todd, the cowbells. I don't agree with getting rid of them because I know that there was like some pushback by the NCAA to get rid of the cowbells because a couple people had seizures. I don't like them, but that's their thing, and I guess just let them roll with it. I don't like them at all either, but it is what it is. But yeah, I think Alabama is going to win this game, but anything's possible. Mississippi State could, but Alabama's probably not going to lose.
Mm-hmm. I really like this play by Daniel. I don't know, like Jahmyr Gibbs, he's been a bright spot for Bama this year. I'm not saying that it's all bad for Bama, but like several players haven't been playing as well. Of course, Will Anderson's one of them. But I definitely do think that Jahmyr Gibbs will have a big game. Let's definitely agree with that point. My bad, I was muted.
I was about to say, I thought I was frozen or something for a minute. Sorry.
Yeah. So we got the whiteout going on in Happy Valley, but it's against Minnesota, which is a little strange. Like surprising that it isn't for Ohio State. But both teams have been sorry, I could talk. But Minnesota, I don't know. I really thought they would win the West for sure this year, but they've had two pretty disappointing losses against Purdue and Illinois. So I don't know. Like I was thinking that Minnesota might win this game. Oh, it's on. Might win this game, but I don't know. Like I know Penn State didn't look great, but they can definitely cement themselves as the third best Big Ten team if they do well in this game. Do you think so? Or do you think we'll see it upset?
I think Minnesota Penn State is on ABC, right? It's on ABC.
It's ABC, yeah.
Yeah, someone said it's on Fox. But I don't know. It's funny what you said about the being a whiteout game. I think the reason why it's not for Ohio State is because I don't think Penn State thinks they can beat Ohio State.
Yeah.
That's why it's not the whiteout game. They want to do it against a team they think they can beat. Because Penn State is obviously not on the level of Michigan, Ohio State. We know that because Penn State, I still believe Penn State should have lost to Purdue in week 1. Obviously, that game, Payne-Durham, it was this close to being a catch. They didn't give it to him. And then Penn State went down the field and obviously scored. Penn State's not an elite football team this year. A lot of people were hyping up the Michigan game. I didn't do a video on it again because, again, it was a top team and everybody did a video on it. But if I had to pick the Michigan-Penn State game, I would have picked Michigan to win by at least 14, and it wasn't even that close. So, I mean, Penn State's not that good. They're good, but they're not like that good. They're not elite. But Minnesota, like you were talking about, it's kind of interesting with them because the fact that Minnesota is was a team that coming in like the season, they were playing really well at the beginning, but they've kind of like fallen off, especially they lost to Purdue, and then they've just been struggling a little bit. So I don't know. I think that Penn State's going to win. It's at home. I don't think Minnesota's going to be able to get it done. Obviously, again, I'm saying Penn State's not as good as like they have been in the past, but I do think Penn State's going to win by probably 7-10 at least.
Yeah. And so yeah, good point by Matt here. What Fox is why OSU is in a night game.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't know. Tanner Morgan was looking so good at the beginning of the year, and then he's kind of reverted back to the guy that he was with Mike Sanford Jr. as the offensive coordinator last year. I don't know. Like I was really hoping that he could show off this year, but it's just kind of been disappointing lately. But Mo Ibrahim's still great, so if he goes off and has a huge night, maybe Minnesota could pull off the huge shot.
Well, yeah, Penn State. All Penn State's got to do is just stop him. Like just stop Mo Ibrahim. If you stop him, then if Tanner Morgan's playing poorly, then you've got the game. If Tanner Morgan plays well, then you have to account for the passing game and Mo Ibrahim. But if it's just Mo Ibrahim, Penn State's going to be able to stop him, I think.
Mm-hmm. And here's another game. It's kind of an under-the-radar game. But we got Kansas State traveling to TCU. Now, obviously, TCU playing at home is huge. But but Kansas State has a big 1-2 punch. Adrian Martinez he's only 86 for 138 with 900 yards and 4 touchdowns, but no interceptions. It's crazy how much he's improved with being disciplined, because last year I feel like he just threw an interception at the most inopportune time, like every game. But this year he's just not really doing that. And Deuce Vaughn is one of the best running backs in the country with 661 yards, 3 touchdowns from 120 carries. So do you feel like that Kansas State can have a big shock here?
Well, my number one point on this game is funny that you say it's an under the radar game, and it is because it's on FS1. But if it was like two brand name teams, the 17 versus the number 18, this game would be on Fox, ABC, whoever, whatever the contractual agreements are. And it's like this game is an under the radar game, even though it's two ranked teams because they're not brand schools. So I think that's interesting. But what the point on with Kansas State with Adrian Martinez, I think it's very interesting with him because when he was at Nebraska, I watched every single game with Nebraska last year, and they kept losing by 1 score. And I was like, come on, win a game. You had him against Michigan. You were close with Ohio State. You had every single game, but something went wrong. The snap went over his head, and they fumbled the ball, or he would throw a bad pass, like you said, or he would fumble it, or somebody would fumble. A mistake always happened. He's been mistake-free at Kansas State. I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that, like you said, he's not under Scott Frost anymore, and that he's not at Nebraska where bad things occur in almost every game. And I think that Kansas State, in most instances, would be obviously favored to win, but TCU is playing fantastic this season. I don't know if it can continue because obviously – my mind's slipping. I can't exactly remember who Kansas State played last week, but I know, or if they played at all, but I know that the TCU Oklahoma State game probably wore out TCU. So if Kansas State's more fresh, I think they do have a chance. But if TCU can ride the momentum from last week, then I think TCU can win for sure.
Kansas State had a bye last week.
That helps.
And then the week before that, they played a nice 10-9, a nice 10-9 win against Iowa State.
Well, Kansas had a win over Iowa State 14-11, so I guess Iowa State keeps it close against the Kansas schools, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is one team coming off a big win against another team that they're kind of reeling a bit. They haven't played that well. It's Colorado and Oregon State. Did you see any of the highlights of that Colorado-Cal game? That was a good game, man. I mean, not great football, but a good game for sure.
I actually didn't. Obviously, I don't know if it was on the Pac-12 Network. Probably was on the Pac-12 Network, so I didn't see it. But I should have watched the highlights. But I did see Colorado got the win. I was like, wow, they won. It's kind of like following the the mantra of all these coaches that have been fired during the season by the school they were at, and then they've won the next week. And it's like, so I think Colorado is now a better team now that Carl Durrell's gone and they're improved. But it's kind of like someone was talking about with California. California's best game of the season that they played was against Arizona, and they beat Arizona. And that's because the running back for California, Jay Knott, just ran all over Arizona, and Arizona's defense couldn't stop him. Well, that's basically all California has on offense right now. And I think teams are figuring that out, kind of like with Mo Ibrahim with Minnesota. You just have to stop the running back. That's all you got to do, because California's passing game stinks. I don't know why either. Jack Plummer was a decent quarterback at Purdue, but it's not working out. So if California, obviously they can't run the football, they're going to struggle this season. But for Colorado against Oregon State, I think Oregon State has a better passing offense, even though I know Chance Nolan was struggling. But now they got Ben Gulbranson, and he's playing well at times. So I do think that they're going to beat Colorado. I know Colorado, a lot of people are like, man, maybe they can win another one. But I do think that Oregon State's better than California, especially in the passing game. And I think Oregon State's going to get the win by like 7.
Mm-hmm. Appreciate the support from Rick and Clint. Clint, dream big, man. Dream big. So in one day you become just like us. Appreciate the support.
Yeah, that's awesome, Matt. I think that's awesome, man. But there's probably people that have a higher bar than me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you.
So this is a game between two ACC teams that really just season hasn't been what they wanted, and it's Pitt traveling to Louisville. Man, Scott Satterfield, how is that guy still have a job compared to some of these coaches that have lost a job? Like, I don't know, it just shocks me. But what do you think about this game? Do you think that Louisville can have a nice home win, or do you think that Pitt will spoil the party?
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that, because I actually thought Scott Satterfield, probably would have already been fired, or he definitely, in my mind, would have been fired. I didn't even think Paul Chris was going to get fired. So I would have thought Scott Satterfield way before Paul Chris, because I didn't think that was going to happen. I even thought that Scott Satterfield might get fired before Herm Edwards, possibly. I know some people thought, well, Herm Edwards was toast, but I don't know. So Scott Satterfield has been really strong. Louisville, though, to their credit, could easily be 5-1. As I was talking with Austin last night, and they could definitely be 5-1. They should have beat Boston College. They should have beat Florida State. So if they were 5-1, then a lot of people would be picking Louisville, obviously. But Louisville, to me, is kind of like Nebraska in the fact that they find ways to lose a lot of games. So if Louisville can keep the mistakes under control, they're going to win the game. But if they turn it over one or two too many times, they're not going to win. So I know it's kind of not a great answer, because I'm picking two scenarios. But if they turn it over multiple times, Pitt's going to win by 7. But if Louisville is mistake free, I got Louisville by 7.
Mm-hmm. I'm just not sure that quarterback Malik Cunningham's going to be back. I heard something about him. We might have 2 backup quarterbacks in this game. I'm going to try to read the ESPN. Is the game? Oh, he is expected to play. Okay. And Pitt is having their backup quarterback in. But yeah, I don't know. I think Louisville might be able to win this game for Austin. Hopefully they can. I don't know how good this backup quarterback for Pitt is. I haven't seen that much Pitt lately. But they did beat Virginia Tech pretty comfortably. Now we're at
most people are.
Yeah. Sorry, my sister goes to Virginia Tech, and I feel bad for her, man. Like, she goes to all these games cheering on her Hokies. And then, man, they just keep losing every week. My family, actually, except me, because I'm in school, I had to stay at school. But my family went down for that Miami game. And, man, they're excited that second half, man. They're like, ooh, is Miami going to blow it? But Miami still ended up winning.
Mm.
Yeah. So our Pac-12 After Dark game is Washington against Cal. Now, these are two teams looking to bounce back, as Washington, it looked like they could maybe be the playoff team. Maybe they could be in the spot that UCLA is in right now. But they did lose 2 out of their last 3 games, losing at UCLA, at Arizona State before returning home and beating Arizona. And Cal was hoping that they could have like maybe a 7 or 8 win year. But they got blown out by Washington State, and then lost to Colorado out of all teams in overtime. So, which team do you think will bounce back? It is in Berkeley, though, which does give Cal the home field advantage.
I think that the home field advantage is helpful, obviously. And I know that a lot of people point out that Washington is better at home than they are on the road, which is true. And obviously, Penix historically has been better at home, even when he was at Indiana, than when he was on the road. But man, Cal, you lost to Colorado. I don't know. I mean, if they had to beat Colorado, I'll be like, okay, I think Cal can win this game, but you lost to Colorado. If you hadn't lost to Colorado, you made me lose a lot of faith in you. I don't know. I mean, obviously anything's possible, and your teams are much better at home. But I think that Washington's offense is still, even on the road, is going to be better than Cal's. And it's really going to come down to, can California's defense keep Washington at bay on offense? Can they keep the score close? Because if the score is close, then I think that Cal can win, because they have to win this game like 24-21. If Washington gets in the 30s, it's over. So it's really going to come down to that. But I think Washington is probably going to win this game by 7-10. I usually pick most of them 7-10 with the possibility of it being a bigger win. But I'm going to lean Washington here. But I think that if California's defense can stop Washington's offense, they'll have a chance.
For sure. And just, we're not going to go in one other game. I don't know if you've seen any of Liberty, but we have what Uncle Lou called the hypocrite bowl between Liberty and BYU. Of course, Liberty hiring Hugh Freeze, being a Christian school. And then BYU just, I don't know, people don't like Mormonism. But what do you think of this game? Have you seen, I don't know if you've seen any Liberty, but Liberty is like, for a group of 5 team, they consistently push out good records. Like, I think they're 7-1 right now. Mm-hmm. So what do you think of this game?
Well, I agree on the fact that you're right that I haven't watched Liberty at all, unfortunately. I have seen BYU, though, and BYU has been kind of inconsistent. I mean, they beat Baylor, which obviously Baylor has proven to not be as good as people thought, obviously. So that win's kind of lost a little bit of luster. But BYU, they lost to Oregon Valley. So BYU's not like a fantastic team. They have definitely taken a step back this year. They probably have more talent than Liberty. Obviously, BYU is kind of like, more of the Notre Dame. They're not Notre Dame, but they've been a better independent, historically, and they've been really good recently. But they have lost a few games this year, and they're not as good. So, heck, we'll go with Liberty. I'll pick Liberty by 3. I mean, I have really no idea on this game, but it is at Liberty, so BYU's been struggling, so we'll go with Liberty by 3.
Mm-hmm. And just to take a quick look, I know you already picked these games, so we're not going to go super in-depth into them because obviously Watch Only Talk Sports, like Jeffrey breaks these 2 games down even more in-depth than we do right here on Only Talk Sports. But your team, IU, is heading to Piscataway in New Jersey to take on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Just like a quick few thoughts in your team, Indiana, and what do you expect out of them in Piscataway? Not a tough road environment, so definitely a winnable game for IU.
Well, it's kind of like there was an article. It was, I think, from like one of the major sport, not like ESPN. It was like College Football News or Sporting News or one of those. But it was basically like they were just talking about as well. They're kind of like agreeing with what I said in my video, that Indiana has looked good even though they've lost 4 in a row. I mean, against Michigan, they were competitive, and then they just crumbled at the end when the offensive line couldn't protect Connor Bazelak. And then Michigan, obviously, is Michigan. They're a really good team. They're going to pull away. They're going to wear down on you as the game goes along. Indiana was fairly competitive against Cincinnati. They kind of weren't, but they kind of were. And then they were fairly competitive against Nebraska, kind of, sort of as well. It's like they've been decent. And then the Maryland game, it was at Indiana, and they easily could have won. But they just had too many. I think they had 3 turnovers. I think Ben said Rutgers is going to win down in the chat. But I don't know. I mean, it is at Rutgers. But if Indiana, it's kind of like with Washington Cal. It's the same thing. Indiana's offense is the key here because Rutgers' offense this season's been bad, just like California's. if Indiana's offense can put up points and get into the 30s like they did against Maryland, then I think Indiana's going to win the game. But if Indiana struggles on offense because it's on the road or Rutgers defense is able to stop them, then I think Rutgers will win. But it's going to come down, can Indiana put up enough points to pull away?
Yeah, definitely should be a good, close game. And we have two teams that are looking to bounce back in this one. We got Baylor taking on Kansas. I don't know. I'm just surprised that I don't know. Maybe it's because I really like Dave Aranda and the way that he runs his teams, but I don't know. I thought that Baylor should have definitely won the. I mean, I know they lost their quarterback, but I feel like they definitely should have won the West Virginia game, just how West Virginia's been playing. So that was a little alarming. But they are 10-point favorites, taking on our recently. I mean, the season doesn't look as good, but still a Cinderella season for Kansas. What are your quick thoughts on this one?
Well, the thing that's really interesting about this game here is because, like with Baylor, I picked Baylor to beat West Virginia, and Baylor should have beat West Virginia. And obviously, shoulda, coulda, woulda, West Virginia won the game. It's like Blake Shapen fumbling the ball just completely out of nowhere. It's like he just blew out of his hand. There was no pressure. He just lost the ball. West Virginia picks it up, runs all the way back. That's 7 points. And then obviously there was a couple other fumbles in the game. So again, Baylor probably is a better team. That's why odds makers don't think Kansas is good, even though they're the Cinderella, because obviously Oklahoma was favored by 9 against Kansas, and you saw that Kansas ended up losing by 10. So the odds makers, they get it. So Baylor is favored. I mean, Kansas can win this game because they are Cinderella, but they just seem like they're a little bit off now that Jalen Daniels is gone. Jason Bean's a good backup. He started games for him last year, and they beat Texas with him, but they just seem to be a little bit worse now. And obviously, those close wins are now turning into close losses now that Jalen Daniels is out. So it's probably going to be a close loss to Baylor, but they can win the game. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it'll be a fascinating game. And we got two ACC teams that are looking to bounce back. We got Miami taking on Duke. And I looked it up, and at one point, I think tickets were like $4 for this game. Miami really has trouble selling tickets, almost as bad as UCLA. It's fascinating just how cheap some of these tickets are. What do you think of this matchup?
Well, if I was down in Miami, I think I could afford a ticket for sure. But yeah, I mean, Miami it's kind of frustrating for Miami fans because you have like Lincoln Riley at USC, and they got all those transfers, and they've done what they've done, and USC is playing outside the one loss to Utah, and even in that game they played fantastic. I think a lot of Miami fans thought that this would happen to them too. They thought with Mario Cristobal coming, it was going to be an instant fix, and they were going to be like rebounded easily. I'm not going to blame Mario Cristobal, obviously, for the problems. It's his first year, but Miami is definitely far below what people thought they were going to be coming into the season. People thought Miami could win the ACC, potentially, possibly, especially maybe the side of the division that they're in, but they have definitely underwhelmed. Duke, kind of like Kansas, has kind of slipped back a little bit since the start of the season. When they're 4-1, they've lost their last 2, and even though they were close losses, they've lost their last 2 games, and I think they're kind of slipping a little bit. This is a really big game for Miami. Miami needs to win this game to build some momentum in the second half of the season. But Miami is the way better team here. They have a lot more talent than Duke, but they just have not played like it. So it's going to be very interesting.
Joey really likes our show and wants me to invite Jackson. That would be fun. Another 3-man poll. We can ask Jackson, and we could definitely check that out. Another game that you looked at, and funny enough that Joey's here, it's Texas Tech and West Virginia. Another big game, and another big game for Neil Brown. Like, if Neil Brown doesn't want to get fired, this might be another game that he has to win. What do you think of this one?
Well, I think this game is very interesting as well because I like doing these games that it's very tight because, I mean, that's why my record is not the greatest because these games could go either way. I mean, West Virginia is a decent team. I mean, it's like I told Mark, in the Pac-12, you got Colorado. They're the worst team by far. And then you've got, like, You've got in the SEC is Vanderbilt. You got in the Big Ten it's Northwestern. Those are the three worst teams in those divisions or in the conferences. I mean, of those three. And then you've got like the ACC is kind of like tons of teams. But in the Big 12, no team's bad. There is not one team in this conference that you could say is a bad team. West Virginia and Texas Tech are both 3-3, but they're both very solid teams. I mean, Texas Tech beat Texas. Obviously, Quinn Ewers was not playing in that game, and it was Hudson Card and B. John Robinson fumbled the ball at the end. But Texas Tech beat Texas. I mean, they're a good team, and obviously, even though there were some breaks for West Virginia, they beat Baylor. I mean, West Virginia is a decent team. Texas Tech's a decent team. They're both really good, but it's at Texas Tech. And again, when you have two teams that are very similar, sometimes the home field is the difference. I mean, I would probably lean Texas Tech here, but West Virginia could easily pull this game off because, I mean, they have a lot of talent on their team. Both teams are solid, even though they're 3-3.
Yeah, it was just crazy how electric Texas Tech looked when they beat Texas. Like that, if they can have that type of atmosphere every game, they might. Who knows? They might be able to even beat. Well, actually, they could definitely beat Oklahoma this year. I was thinking because of Oklahoma. I was thinking normal Oklahoma. All right, here's what Joey thinks. West Virginia's a better team than you think. Problem with WVU is we have 3 defensive players that are game time decisions. Ooh, that could definitely affect the outcome. And we have another huge game in the Big Ten West coming up. We got Purdue taking on Wisconsin. And man, did you see that Wisconsin Illinois game? That is Big Ten West football at its worst, man. I wanted to watch throw bleach in my eyes watching that game, man. That was a crazy game. Crazily low scoring game.
I think like with Wisconsin, I mean, I told Mark, I was like, in one of the live streams a few days ago, I was kind of enamored by Wisconsin blowing out Northwestern 42-7. And I was like, man, maybe Jim Leonard's got it figured out. Graham Mertz threw 5 touchdowns. Maybe he's the answer. It wasn't Paul Chryst. But since that game, then they lose to Michigan State. And I picked Wisconsin to beat Michigan State. And I've been burned twice. I picked Wisconsin to beat Illinois, and I picked them against Michigan State, and they've lost both times. So, I mean, again, anything's possible. It's at Wisconsin, but Washington State won at Wisconsin. So, Wisconsin's just all around nowhere near as good as they usually are. And they're just struggling. Even their defense, like I said in my video on the game, Wisconsin usually has a great defense, but they're not even playing as well on that side of the ball either. And that's how Wisconsin wins a lot of games, just like Iowa does. Since Wisconsin's defense is not as good and they're giving up 30-something points to a lot of teams, I think Purdue's going to easily be able to play into that factor because Purdue puts up points and they've got a great offense. So to me, that is going to be the difference. If Purdue's offense can get clicking in this game, and now that Aiden O'Connell is healthy again and he's playing well again, I don't think Wisconsin's going to be able to win because Wisconsin just can't put up enough points.
As we got Yvette and Joey here, and Daniel wants us to join the Big Ten, man. I don't know. I mean, who knows? If the ACC goes complete like GBD says, maybe we'll have to join the Big Ten, but I don't know, man. Just the Michigan shutting us out all these years, and now they want us. Like, I don't know. It's just like it'll hurt the soul of Notre Dame fans if you join the Big Ten, but who knows what will happen. Anyways, any final thoughts for this week, Jeffrey? Obviously, we don't want to step on our good pal Tony's toes, as he's going to do a live show with the USC Trojan. That will be awesome. But this should be definitely another good week of action. Who knows? The games this week could be even closer than many of the great games last week. Obviously, that Tennessee-Alabama game was close, but that Penn State-Michigan game was not. So
I think there's a lot of interesting games this week. I think kind of like how you're talking about last week, there was a lot of like big games. They were calling them Separation Saturday, where you had Clemson win at that. Are they going to win at Florida State? And you had Tennessee, Alabama. You had all those games like that were like really, really important. This week you don't have as many. Obviously, you got the Syracuse Clemson game, and you got UCLA Oregon and stuff like that. But there's not as many like of the top tier games, but there's a lot of sneaky good games. Again, I'm looking forward to games like Texas Tech, West Virginia, and I'm looking forward to tons of games like that, Kansas, Baylor. Those are the type games I like to see, these very underrated games, and there's a lot of sneaky good games. I think that's going to be a fantastic week in college football. I don't think, again, there's as many high-end games that get people, just the average fan excited. But for people like us that love college football and we like all the teams and watch all the games we can, there's a lot of sneaky good games to watch, and I can't wait for it.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to do a little response to Joey here? This is why WVU wins. Texas Tech has no running game, and West Virginia solid on the front line. So I think we'll drop 8 and stop them frequently. And he has them winning big by 20 points.
Well, yeah, I mean, anything's possible. I think West Virginia, again, is a really good team. I think that they can definitely win the game. And, I mean, it's going to be tough on the road. But, again, West Virginia is a lot better. To most people, they would be like, well, they're 3-3. They're not good. But, again, West Virginia is a really solid team, and they definitely can beat Texas Tech. And West Virginia's running game's been doing a lot better. And that's helped JT Daniels out a lot. So they definitely can win for sure.
Mm-hmm. And Ben saying NDS derailed this year. Yes, this is one bad season, Ben. You guys had a bad season in the COVID year and bounced back. We will bounce back. It was Marcus Freeman's first year. I don't like using that excuse, but I definitely did think him being a first-time head coach did affect some things.
Mm-hmm.
And Joey says ACC or Pac or Big 12 going nowhere. A5, not Power 5. Keep in mind they will backfill. All right. Well, everyone, we had a great chat tonight. Thanks for everyone for coming into the chat. And this is just going to be another great week of college football. I can't wait to see it. Jeffrey can't wait to see it. It should be fun. I might go live to watch the games, but I don't know. My Saturday might be a little busy, but we'll see. It definitely should be another great week of college football. Thanks for everyone for joining us, and have a great night.